Hello, hello. Welcome to Storybook Office Hours. This is super exciting. We started with the Storybook, I think, Meet the Storybook team a couple of months ago, and we love the Storybook team. So, of course, that rolled into the Storybook channel. And I had reached out to Michael Shillman and asked him to come, talk to us about the Storybook team. And Michael brought Kai. We love Kai. Kai brought Mark Berry, and so now it's just like a whole Storybook thing going on here, and it's very exciting. So I just want to introduce Kai Roeder and Mark Berry. How are you guys doing? Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
I'm great.
Good to have you.
Good.
So I see Ankita, I see Rob and Simon and Edward and Tito and Sonder, and I know some of the, well, we have Ankita who's actually using Storybook quite a bit at work already. We have Rob who's just barely a noob to Storybook, but he's really cool. So I'm just gonna open it up to you guys. You know how office hours works. Who's got questions?
I do.
Oh wait,
Always.
Before we jump into questions, raise your hand. Yes, okay. Edward's got our first question, but real quick, before we jump into questions, I just want to give a minute to Kai and Mark and let us know if there's any new announcements, anything that you're working on that you want to talk about, or you want to jump into questions. Anything exciting going on, coming up?
I mean, Mark has posted something about Storybook testing stuff.
Yeah,
I did see that post yesterday.
There was a.
Do you want to talk a minute about it?
I mean, I can. I don't know how. I guess I don't know how much there is to say really, but it's just so Storybook. Somebody had already started the libraries for using stories for React and Vue, and so I basically just took the React one, converted it to Angular, and made it work to where it should, unless you're using some kind of add-on that's doing something that's not going to work with the testing environment, it should compose all the decorators, args, parameters, all that stuff into just a single component and module that you can import in like testbed or something to render the story. And so.
Sweet, thank you. So okay, and if anyone breaks it, then they should just come and let us know. And
and I was saying, it's like I wrote it, but I'm not the most experienced with tests, so definitely correct me if I did something wrong.
Maybe we should let Shai test it.
Yeah, let Shai test it. Shai will break it.
Are you aiming for end-to-end tests, of unit tests, or integration tests mostly, I think?
I'm not really sure. I basically just got it to where it could use the stories in testbed. That's kind of as far as I've thought about it.
That's all right. We can pull in some more people to help us break it and then help us fix it. And I also tagged, because I saw your post yesterday, and I tagged our new friend Jordan. He was brought to us. He's a new guy on the Cypress team, and he's super cool. So we can always get help from the Cypress team too. We can have like a crossover episode, the Storybook Cypress. I love it. Okay, so thank you very much, Mark, because we're excited about that. And I think the Angular community really loves Storybook, so we always love having things available for us. Edward, and Kita has a question too after Edward.
So let me kind of explain how I've been using Storybook and see if I'm using it right, basically, and where my issues start. So I might start with a really dumb component, and with Storybook, excellent dumb components. I can get everything just the way I want it, make sure that all the inputs and outputs are working. And then that has a parent component. And in the parent component, I might be injecting, 3 services, including an RxJS store. And it seems, and this may be exactly what was intended, that configuring the story for that is just like configuring a test spec for the test bed, in terms of I've got to create, if I want to keep it isolated, I've got to create 4 mocks, because otherwise I got to bring in all this stuff. Is that because anything where I start injecting services, each service adds some level of complexity. Is that the intent? Well, of course you're going to add mocks here, or real services in some cases, or what have you.
Isn't that kind of the question mark I've asked on the Storybook Discord channel? It was about how to provide services and stuff like that. So you can, of course, for first let me answer your question. Of course, for services that do network requests, you need to mock them because Storybook is a local tool and you don't have a server, or you should not have a server that you need to rely on. And you can write a mock service and use Angular's way of replacing the token. I don't know the technical term for it, but you can replace the service token, service name, with another service, which is a mock service, and you implement all those mock methods, and it should work fine. I think I've done it.
So I'm not using it wrong. It's yes, that is an expected behavior that I would have to mock up these services.
Yeah, I mean, when people are asking like kind of how to do that, that's kind of, I tell them do it similar to how you would do it in a test, just because most people kind of know that, and I don't know if that's the best way, but that is kind of what
I find
tell
the metadata decorators to be almost identical to the ones in testbed. So that's my question. I just like knowing I'm not doing it wrong.
And Keith.
Sorry,
go ahead, Kai.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, hello everyone. I was just gonna say, to add on to Edward's point, that Storybook essentially is to test your component in isolation, right? So if you feel like you're injecting something to test it, that's kind of right, because that's what it's doing. I mean, I'm trying to see that in order for it to set it up to test it, you have to mock things. I think that's how it will be. And I also shared a link that is there on Storybook's website for documentation, the tutorial of how you can create storybooks for parent components that might be more complex, because they might have, you have to use the child component, and they also might have the store. They have an example with the store for NXGS, I think, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so like, how would you add the store and all of that? They have an example for that. That might help you. My question was that, and I shared this in the Storybook channel also, that I don't know, Guy, if you had time to look at the code that I shared the link, right? But having to basically write template code for a component that uses content projection, I don't know if that is the right approach, because it feels like I shouldn't have to write more. I shouldn't have to duplicate component code for the book story for it to work. That makes sense. But I also don't know if there's any other way of doing it.
What code do you need to add to make content projection work?
I need to write, so for all my other component stories, I can just be like component, and I put the name of the component, and then I pass in the args, and that just works. But for the flip, let me share the line.
So you mean that you don't actually write a template, but just pass in the component with args, and it renders without writing any HTML or any template anywhere?
Yeah, for all the other component stories, that works. But for a component that uses content projection, I have to have like ng container and then the name of the named slot, and then pass in the args value to it. So I just wanted to ask if there's a better way of this. Like, I know Connie also shared an example, and she was also doing something similar. But there's also not much documentation around it, so I was just wondering if there's a better way.
Mark, maybe you?
I mean, every time I've tried to get away from not using a template for my stories, I end up using one just because I have so many components that use like the NG content and things like that, that I rarely can get away with just providing a component to my stories.
Right. I mean, I was expecting that I would just be able to do like args dot something, like args dot be slotted name, and that would be enough. But I just wanted to make sure that's not supported, and so we need to do it. We need
Yeah,
to
nobody's
template.
done. Yeah, nobody's done anything for that yet.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I just wasn't sure if it's just not there.
Now I need to rethink my approach of writing stories, actually, because I've never. I always write templates. I never even have thought about just using the component token and passing arcs. I always write a template for it. I'm not sure why. Maybe because I'm heavily rely on MDX, Markdown with JSX, and it prints me little show code examples, and I want to be in control of what to show in those code examples that people can copy and paste. So basically, one major reason why I do it, I guess.
Well, and to me, it feels more natural doing that because that's how I would use the component in my app. So I'm like, well, that's how I'll use it in my story. So
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
But I do understand like the reason. I think from what I understood, I can't remember. I think it was like Michael was talking about it, and like he was saying how we're trying to get it to where all you do is pass back a component, because then it's more, you can try to like automate it more, and like you can have tools to kind of generate the stuff for you, whereas a template, it can't really kind of predict what you're going to do with that. But for me, I hadn't been able to really get away from using templates.
Yeah, getting away from templates might help when the just-in-time compiler goes away.
Yes, that's true. That's I thought about it as well. Right in this moment. So
I just thought about that Homer Simpson gif that goes "Don't."
Yeah, exactly. I wonder what it would look like if just-in-time compiler just goes away, and how Storybook needs to approach this change.
Yeah,
I'm just really glad that you saw the RFC and jumped in there, because you literally saved Storybook. How do you feel? Because Igor was like, hey, does anybody mind if I do this? And nobody said anything. And then Kai was like, wait. So that was very helpful. Good job, Kai.
Oh, there were some other things like tests, but nobody does that. So,
well, it was a really good consideration, I think, and it was important that because Igor also said it was very good feedback. So I hope the Storybook team sent you a cake.
Yeah. Actually, I don't think that the just-in-time compiler going away will be a big hurdle. It needs some fiddling around with this new thing, which isn't. I don't think it's a big deal for Storybook though. It will take a couple of hours to get it up and running with the new thing.
Well, Sandra volunteered. Did you hear that, guys? Yeah,
sounds great because
easy.
Yeah, I have a price tag though.
Oh man, I don't think any of us can afford you, Sonder.
Yeah, one thing that I always ran into when trying to kind of I guess get away from using the templates was, so I haven't looked at that new stuff y'all were talking about too much. I just kind of briefly looked at it, but would that, because I don't think Angular currently supports it, but would that allow directives and ng content and that kind of stuff to be added without using a template, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Because right now it doesn't support that, right?
No. That is something they are going to work on. Probably there might be an early draft on this in version 14, but I'm not expecting it any sooner. If it's sooner, it would be a big thing, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer because they really need to do a boatload of things before they can rid of it, because testing is also using it. And once they have solved the problem for testing, they mostly have solved the issues that Storybook is having too.
Mark, you might, if you have time next week, you are invited if you want to come and audit my advanced DOM manipulation course. How much do you know about the view container ref?
Well, I've used it some. I don't know. It kind of depends. Like, I mean,
I did Angular for years in big enterprise projects, and I didn't really ever use it because, I could just write my own stuff. I didn't really need to. But when I was working on the DOM course, and Sonder was helping me with some stuff, because I was going and breaking all kinds. I was like, Sonder, what's wrong with my code? And he'd be like, oh, it's right there. But I also spent some time with Alex Rickabaugh, and he taught me the view container ref, which I did not understand how cool it was. And so we're going to talk about that next week. So if you have time to join us, maybe you can just pop in and audit the course, and we can talk about that. Because it's like, from an Ivy perspective, what is the best way to do that? So it might be helpful for you.
Yeah. Because I've done stuff with it, but yeah, I don't really know if it's, I don't know if it could be doing more or not. So
Alex worked a lot on the Ivy stuff, so he's really familiar with that. And he basically said and he showed me how to do it his way, and it's beautiful, and it's so simple and clean, and it really makes me happy. So come join us next week, and you can see it too.
Also, probably Storybook should go and use the AOT compiler, because
sure.
It's a tool thing anyway.
Yeah.
I've discussed this with Minko, Alex, and Alan. We had a meeting, and when we initially talked about enabling Ivy in Storybook, I thought it is necessary to use AOT as well at the same time, because I was not aware of that you can use Ivy with the just-in-time compiler. And we played around a bit with the code, but even they said, we can partially use AOT in the code base, but using it completely, they weren't sure if that's possible right now. So with the new RC, maybe it is. Maybe because we have lots of people here listening to this discussion, maybe I should go one step back and explain the technical background we're talking about. So in Storybook, you can write your stories and add. You might know you can add a template. So every story is at the end one navigation item you can navigate to, and it renders an Angular application with a template. And in order for Storybook to render this template, it needs to take the template and make a component from it during runtime, which makes it impossible to use ahead of time compilation. Maybe Sander now raises his hand and says, no, that's wrong. I'm not sure. I'm not too much into compilers, but that's what I understood so far. And the Angular team have an OpenRC, or is it still open? I'm not sure. That could provide an API to create components during runtime and make them ahead of time compatible using an API for creating this component. This is not yet possible. And the issue Storybook now has with this API is that I thought, and I even asked this question, and I think Alex was like, yeah, that's the way, does Storybook now need to run through the whole template, parse it, and then create like instructions for it? And this sounds not like something you can do in 3 hours, or else you need to be Sander, I think. So that's kind of the thing we are talking about here.
Yeah, actually Ivy compiles a little bit different, and the template gets compiled a little bit different as we are used on before. And Ivy directly compiles to JavaScript instructions, and those JavaScript instructions are the internal API of Ivy. I was rooting for a long time that they would make this API public, because then you can really build those things manually if you need to. Like Storybook needs to build like a set of instructions so they can run your components in a certain setting. The thing is, they don't want to open this up because there is too much. Well, they are afraid they will lose the ability to change it later on. So they make a simpler version of this, and this would be like the, I don't know how they are calling it, but like an interactive template language, imperative templates, I think it's what's called. So you can program a template instead of writing it as a template. And this would fit the bill for Storybook, because you can basically say, hey, I have this directive and this decorator, and here you go. So that would work, but it takes a little bit. It takes a little bit of putting it on. Another way would be using the AOT compiler on the fly, but that will only fly if you are talking about module-less components, because then you can compile the one component you need and load that in. I think it's too early for that. But you have seen all three RFCs of this: the view engine, the imperative view engine, also getting rid of the YIT compiler. Those go hand in hand, and there is the other one. There is another RFC in this area, and if those are all completed, you are in a pretty good spot.
Hopefully.
Yeah, it will be painful for a while. It might take like a week before everything is up and running again.
I mean, sorry, Natalia has a question. Let's maybe
go ahead
with this one.
I'm enjoying the conversation.
Natalia always has a question. That's why we love her.
I arrived in the middle of the conversation, and I still wanted to keep hearing.
I mean, I can add one thing maybe to this discussion.
Please go ahead.
I think it's a pretty good thing if Storybook would support AOT, because for a very long time, Storybook was using View Engine when Ivy was a thing, as well as just-in-time compilation when it could, or it could not, but when it could use the AOT compilation. And using Ivy and AOT in Storybook means you are as close as possible to compile your components as they were in an application. So you're still in a position where you can write code that works in Storybook but might behave differently in your application, right? So this was the case when it was using View Engine, and sometimes you ship those components to your application, and it behaves differently or breaks, maybe even stuff like that.
Yeah, what I really like, and what sometimes is forgotten, is Storybook is really about writing and creating new components in isolation. Not really. It was never intended for testing. Well, it can be used for testing though. So today we mostly spoke about testing with Storybook, which is an awesome idea. I love it. I think I have been talking about this for a while. But it's really, if you have an application that gets bigger, you can build your components in isolation, and that's so much more easy if you're in a larger environment. Also, to be honest, I think it works the best if you are building library type of things. That's where it really, really shines. If you are building a library, you must be using Storybook, otherwise you're doing it wrong.
True.
He said, well, he has a library that is not using Storybook.
So let's proceed with your question, Natalia.
Yes, hi. So I've been looking into the chromatic deployment for Storybook, and I was wondering, I couldn't find it easily, so that's why I'm asking here if there's a limit for the usage. Is there, some time or some moment where I need to pay for it, or is it free forever, or how does it work?
I believe they have a pretty transparent pricing page. I'm not using Chromatic, to be honest, but they on their website you can see what you can do with the free version and with a corporate version and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I did the deployment during the tutorial, so I was planning to find it there, but okay, I will browse the Chromatic web then.
Yeah, it's been a while since I looked into it, but when I tried it, probably about a year ago, maybe, it was fairly easy to get it set up. And from what I remember, like the site told you like how much you'd used and how much each tier was available. It seemed pretty clear, kind of, but it's been like a year since I looked at it. So
okay, I did the tutorial like last week, and yesterday I did the deployment to Chromatic, and I was planning to find, right there in my deployment or in the information where they redirected me to, but I didn't. So I was wondering, maybe I'm missing something, which I obviously am because this can't be free. So yeah,
they just want to give you enough for free that then you just don't even have any problem paying for it. It's like, oh, okay, fine. Yeah.
But this is a pretty good topic, I think, and not just chromatic, but I forgot the term pixel comparing, like you would write unit tests for your business code. You write, you have some tooling, and there are other alternatives to chromatic that compares your storybook in the previous and the current version. So you commit something and maybe change the design token like a primary color or something, and it then pops up and your CI now tells you, hey, you have breaking changes in your front end, and it shows you this button was previously red and now it's blue. And this is a pretty important feature for UI libraries, I think, because I'm not using chromatic, and that's for some reason I don't want to explain right now. But I don't even use the alternatives to it, and I really should use them because I maintain a UI library at work, and often enough I thought this is a super nice and small change I do here in this little component, and then I get some issues that some other things actually break because of my change, and I didn't notice it because you cannot test it with unit tests. You can with E2E tests, but you don't want to write E2E tests that pixel check every pixel of your website. So kind of not possible. It's
yeah. So I've seen some of the competence that they work based on Webpack. I think it's Percy. I don't want to promote it, but the difference with Chromatic is that it works on top of Storybook. So there's a bit of a challenge in how much it can actually analyze based on that. In that, for Storybook, we're just adding it to our pure components. I know Sander doesn't like that. But the other way around, with Cypress, we have Cypress tests for everything, including our whole pages. So it can analyze more things, more important things for us. So, I was just trying to experiment with Chromatic and see how far it can go. But I will look into the page and I will strive to find the pricing. So thank you.
Okay, so what's the consensus? Chromatic yay or chromatic nay? We like chromatic?
I think we like chromatic. Storybook itself uses chromatic. So the mono repo Storybook does use it. Although honestly, Mark, I'm not sure, but sometimes it brings some trouble, but usually it does work as expected, I guess. So
well, we bring trouble. We all bring trouble. We'll give it to us.
I mean, you can always break things. That's the curse of software.
Sorry. And Kita was saying in the chat that she did a proof of concept between Percy and Chromatic.
Yeah, and Percy had some moral limitations, and financially also, I think we were able to justify Chromatic better. And we just integrated it in our CI/CD pipelines last week. So if anything changes, the pipeline just fails. So it's a good way to get visual testing, to get more. If there's like a color change or anything that changed that you're pushing in your merge request or pull request, you can having Chromatic in your pipeline just lets you know basically like, hey, something's going on, and then we have the design people come in and review it, and then so that is the design is always aware of the changes that are getting pushed.
Exactly. And you have even a platform to discuss things, because a designer might not understand things you've done in the code, and coders don't necessarily understand things that happen in the design decision making. And now you have one platform where you can say, hey, I've changed this color as I was told to, and it changed something else. Is this expected, designer? And you can discuss about it, talk about it.
Yeah, and it'll have all these screenshots, and so the designer can really see what are all the places that the change is going to impact. So they might not, because they might not, I don't know about your designers, but ours don't go in each and every page of the app that often. They probably only just work out a few pages, or we don't even like log into the app that much. So it's easier in that chromatic view that they can just look at those screenshots and be aware of the changes and then improve them. So the design is always aware of the product, and it's always in sync. They're not like, oh, we designed something else and what's on the product is completely different. No, because they approved it. So
if you don't mind me asking, Ankita, that Chromatic deployment, is it still hosted in Chromatic, and does it have access restrictions to only people in your team?
Yeah, it's only restricted to our team. I'm not sure how entirely the setup is done because I didn't do it. But I
no worries.
I can find out more details and I can message you. And if you want, I can share how we have set it up.
That would be interesting. One of the points in favor of Percy was, well, that it works based on Cypress, and we're trying to add Cypress to everything. And the other was that it seemed safer and it looked like we could own the deployment, versus Chromatic, where it lives in the Chromatic servers and it's not ours, and they were concerned about security. But still, I'm still in the research phase about Chromatic, so I don't know if that's entirely true. So I'm curious to find out how you did it and how it works for you. And if anyone else is using Chromatic, I'd love to hear, if it's better, worse, good, bad. Yeah.
I'm not using Chromatic, but if you are evaluating this stuff, go over the page I just linked. I think you have seen it before, but
I hadn't seen it before, so thank you. I hadn't seen this in Cypress.
Yeah, they are naming Percy there, and a couple of other ways to do it, and they even describe how you can roll your own.
We need to just invite Cypress to all our parties from now on, because they always come up.
Yes.
Yeah, Sandra always pretty much will roll on anything. Yeah, old school, cool. I said, son, he's the only person I know who doesn't like GraphQL, and I'm like, how can you possibly not like GraphQL? And he says, well, I write my own front end and back end, so I don't need it. And I'm like, well, yeah, there's that. But for the rest of us normal people,
I definitely agree with Sandra on the GraphQL side.
Yeah. If you're lucky enough to have full control over the front end and the back end, yeah, congratulations, you can get away with that.
The thing is, I don't like adding another layer to the software stack. Every layer comes with its own kind of problems, its own deployment, its own maintenance, its own release cycles and testing and everything like that.
Yeah.
Another
But even
point of failure.
it's better than having a massive bloated front end with all of the business logic in the components in the front end, because we don't want that either. And sometimes if you have a big enterprise company, you have a back end team over here and a front end team over here, and they're not talking to each other. Sometimes they don't even get along. Ask me how I know that. And in that case, if the front end doesn't have any control over the back end, then it can actually be a really game changer.
That is only if the front end and the back end team cannot communicate for whatever reason, then you have a use case for GraphQL. Otherwise, it's like an extra layer you shouldn't be using.
Okay.
Yeah, if the back end team is great with customer service, then yes, that's valid. I would agree with that. Not all back end teams are that great with customer service, but you might be lucky.
Someone please interrupt me with a question. I mean, it's still about Storybook, but I have to ask, if your backend is not in the same repository as your front end, how do you share interfaces? Because this is something. No, that's actually a point against. No, it's not actually, because in GraphQL you can just go and do an introspection query against your endpoint and create TypeScript interfaces for everything. And how do you do it with REST? Within REST API?
We have to do it with snail mail.
Okay.
No, there are things like Swagger.
Yeah, okay. And
there are things like Swagger, and most of the times creating the interface is just getting an answer from your thing. You get the JSON and you paste the types and you're done.
Sander, what happened to your camera? We miss
off
you.
Because
Why?
I'm eating and I'm having an off day, so okay. I have my lights off.
Fine.
The thing is, now I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just missed your camera.
Yeah, I concur with what you're saying, Sandra. Usually it's just a matter of knowing what the interface needs to be for the REST call. And then
there is a plugin.
Anything else, because it's separation of concerns. As long as you do what you said you're going to do, I'm fine.
Yeah, and REST is pretty strict defined. So if you have a REST backend, you know what's coming. The only thing is that you don't have, you have a little bit less control of what is coming from the server. So you might end up with way more data than you need. But actually, that is something you should discuss with the backend team.
Yeah, because that's what we've been using it for, like tables, so that like if the user decides they don't care about columns, we can just exclude that field from the GraphQL, and then don't have to worry about that coming back anymore since they don't care about that column. Yeah, but I mean, you can do that without GraphQL, but it's just
yeah. And that is also just a way of setup. You can do that with REST too, and there are REST and GraphQL are not the only ways to communicate with the backend. So there are multiple ways. What I often do is like create a REST for most of the tables, and then there are a couple of tables where they just need lists from like all the IDs with like a name. Create a couple of functions on the backend that just return the data they need, or like small, do a couple of views instead of tables in your SQL, and share those views through Swagger, and you're done.
It's still about Storybook, but should we proceed? I could still add one thing to this discussion, but maybe someone has a Storybook question here. And if not, we can talk all day long about GraphQL and REST.
If anyone has a Storybook question, raise your hand. Otherwise, Kai, just go where it takes you.
We have something at work. We create. How should I explain this? It's pretty hard for me to explain this because the code for this is pretty complicated as well. But I think this exists for React as well. We have something. We have a service in our applications that is called Accessor, and you can pass in an interface of the basically the whole introspection, the whole model as an interface in this service.query. And what you can do then is use it in your Angular template and write down all your fields, all the fields you need, and it binds itself to the change detection. So it waits for a template to be rendered and collects all the fields it needs, and then only queries all the fields from a GraphQL endpoint that you actually use in your template, and not more and not less. And that's basically pretty cool, I think, because one major issue in GraphQL is, yeah, okay, you can do a query and only select what you need, but oftentimes you end up selecting things, then remove them from the template, but leave them in your query because you forgot about them. And it's kind of, yeah, GraphQL tells you it solved this problem of REST for overfetching things, but at the end, I'm pretty sure lots of queries over querying things as well in GraphQL. But having some sort of technique to write down things in template and only those are queried, I think this is pretty cool. And this exists for React as an open source project. Ours is not so much compatible to open source because it knows about our environment and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have written code generators also that basically take a Swagger endpoint and write out the entire types and everything that goes with it. It comes with a service that handles everything for that table. It does even the validations, because Swagger can list the validations too, and you can basically automate those away into your, not into the model, but a function. I created functions that got the interface of the model and the validators for the model of the data, and then do the validation, like fully automatic with a couple of functions. All of those things are quite easy to generate. It's not that hard to write code generators for those kinds of things. The problem is indeed if there are extra new fields or fields are changing, then you need to manually update all those code or regenerate. And regenerating is not a big issue unless you have changed a boatload of the things in there, and then you're in a world of pain. And that is why code generators alone are not a good idea. You need something like schematics so you can update your code along with them, but then it becomes way more complicated quickly.
That's true.
Yeah, and like, I was just looking, like, I know that like Storybook has some GraphQL add-ons, right? Like, I don't know if I don't know, have you looked at those to see if they can do things like use it to customize or like modify the inputs sort of like you would do with controls or anything, or is it just to like show the query?
I'm not using it, but
okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if you'd looked at it or not.
Because maybe I need to, because but we were able to do everything we need to without it. Okay, because you can set up a local GraphQL server with it, and we have our own solution for that. I just paste the link in case someone else is interested. Yeah, I'm not running out of time. I still have 15 more minutes, so in case someone still wants to talk about something else.
I just want to say I normally listen to everything Sander has to say because I know that Sander is wise. But I love GraphQL, and you can't stop me.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Take that, Sander. I still acknowledge that you're wise and you're always right, but
there is room to grow. There is room to grow. There is room to grow.
Yeah. I have found many use cases for GraphQL in my travels, especially when the front end and the back end teams are widely separated, because you know what happens, Sander, which you've probably seen in real life as well, that in real life, when the back end team and the front end team have whatever poor communication they have, and it's not the individual developer's fault, it's just because it's so big, and it's, you know how it gets in real life, and especially in enterprise, what happens is if that data is not handled in a streamlined way, the front end developers pay for everybody's sins, because it's the front end that takes all the heat, and it's the front end developers that if they're not, if they're not bold enough to go and argue with management and they just sit there and do what they're told, what happens is they just write all this extra code to make everything happen in the front end that needs to happen, and then it's not beautiful, and then the front end gets bigger and bigger.
I have written those code, and I've seen boatloads of code that is basically remapping the data that is coming from the server.
Yeah.
The problem is people are not understanding how to write this code, because JavaScript is an excellent language to handle those things. You can just filter them up whatever you want and be done with that really, really quickly, because actually,
yeah, but in enterprise, I mean, I worked in one company that had like 21 API endpoints that were valid, right? They need to be there because it's a huge company. But then all of that, and it's just the front end just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because the front end then has to have a service for each one, and all these, and then the state management, and that's the thing, is that so many people put so much business logic into state management in the front, in the client, that should be in the back end. I know we see eye to eye, at least on that part.
I totally agree. Most of those things need to be in the back end, because you need a single source of truth, and a single source of truth is not in every freaking client that is out there.
Yes.
It is in the database.
And he's serious when he says freaking. Go ahead, Kai.
Also, I think it's GraphQL is a perfect way to combine multiple APIs in one API, because you can do it with REST. But what I like about GraphQL is you have, let's say, GraphQL Mesh. I think that this is this software from Apollo, right? I'm not sure.
Apollo is the Angular client for GraphQL.
From the I don't know, I forgot.
I love Apollo's amazing. There's like it's like a box full of goodies. Like you get it for the GraphQL client, and then you get so many features. Don't get me started.
Actually, if you're not able to write your own SQL statements, GraphQL is a good addition. But
what did you say?
I mean, yes.
No, because what you're saying, the aggregation and stuff like that, or just dropping fields, you can all do that in a single SQL select.
You can, but this is on the server part. But the front end has now one GraphQL endpoint and can query whatever it wants, and hopefully it had good performance. But the front end does not care about where it comes from, or if it is a query that costs too much, because the backend can handle that. It only queries from those single endpoints.
The thing is, those costs have to be paid anyway, because the backend still needs to do this stuff.
Yes,
so if it's a really costly query, it still will be a very costly query. It's just not a concern of the front end anymore. And it shouldn't be a concern of the front end to begin with, but it doesn't make it better. And that is the risk of putting an extra layer in between, because you are saying, oh, the GraphQL will take care of this and will do the aggregation and the select and the joins and whatever. But those things needs to be done. And if there is an extra layer in between, those things will be slower.
Yes.
As long as at least it's not in the client, though.
Yeah.
It's not in the client, but it's not solving the problem.
It should be in the back end. We agree on that. It should be in the server. Absolutely, it should be in the server. But sometimes people don't have access to that.
I totally know. I know why it's there. And the only reason for GraphQL that it exists is because front end and back end teams cannot communicate. And with communication, I mean that they are not able or willing or whatever to talk with each other. Or they are just using an external service, so they have no influence whatsoever on the external service. And you can put in, like, I would build my own Node.js proxy in between, because that would be faster. But that's not for
you build
everyone.
Your own everything. You're Sonder.
I prefer building my own middleware instead of using that from someone else.
I could imagine you building your own car from the ground up, just for the principle of it, Sonder.
Who said I didn't?
Yeah, I know, because you bought a car. I know that.
Yeah. I get a new one next week, so.
I want you to build one, just for fun.
I'd build a tractor, though.
I would believe that. I would believe that. All right, we are almost out of time. And I just want to give us all a heads up because we actually did go a little bit over because we got a late start. And so we just need to wrap it up. Any final thoughts from anybody? If not, I have final thoughts.
Me too. Thanks for doing this. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate every Storybook office hours.
Yeah.
Thanks to Sanders, we jump into other topics, which is great as well.
They were actually, really good topics. Yep. Always.
So just to clarify, so GraphQL is the middleman, you're saying, between the backend and the UIs, so that those that are not in backend can perform the task that they needed by querying the backend.
Yes, and Rob, you are in the architect training with us, and week 3 is next week. We're going to talk about GraphQL.
Okay, cool.
I love GraphQL, so
I
it's going to be in there. It's coming up.
It was great, but then they took it off for some reason that I don't understand. So
well, you're going to see it some more. Okay, so anything else? Anybody else going once?
Well, I just want to say I love Storybook. It enables a lot of things that were not possible before, and it helps people building things in isolation. And pretty soon it will be very usable for testing too. So thank you, guys.
I agree. Hear, hear. I also love Storybook. So go ahead.
I really need to forward this to the team because at least I only talk about Storybook recently, like for the whole last 6 months or so. But I will tell the others. And
We've seen a lot more since you started doing the Storybook office hours, because we had Ankita, who was just here, who did, her and Kyler talked about Storybook during the NX Comp. They had a presentation featuring Natty, and I just had a meeting the other day, and I'm trying to get her to do her first technical talk, and she is thinking about doing it about Storybook or featuring Storybook.
Sounds great.
So that's cool. So yeah, we've actually seen a lot more. And Connie, who is probably sleeping right now because she's in APAC, she actually had this Spanish language app that she built for herself because she's learning Spanish, and it was like how she keeps all her notes. And after she saw the Meet the Storybook team, she went back and implemented Storybook into her demo that she's been doing tech talks on. So she's now teaching Storybook as well. So it's spreading. So good to see. Because the reason why I went to bug Michael Shillman in the first place was because I love Storybook, and I was like, come and show us. And I just thought if we see the people behind the code, it really breaks down those walls very much, and it's working. And I love these discussions. So thank you so much.
Happy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that Natalia wrote that she's terrified, and I want to add that at least I am also terrified for every presentation I need to do, especially in English, because that's my native language. So it's totally fine, and I think as soon as you start talking, for me, it just then the flow starts and you get into it. Only one thing is important, that you prepare enough to be fluent and about your topic.
Such good advice. I agree.
Yeah,
I would always get really nervous, and then once I start talking, you get into the code and you forget to be nervous, but you have to prepare. Such good advice, Kai.
Well, I still pack extra underwear if I do talks.
Sorry, what, Sander?
I still pack extra underwear when I'm doing talks.
You're a nut, Sander.
Right?
What were you saying,
I'm
Rob?
just honest. I'm shitting my pants every freaking time I'm on stage.
You know we're gonna share this on YouTube later, Sander.
I don't. It's true. So
that's okay. I also had it recorded when you said that you liked GraphQL.
Yeah, yes. That is out of context.
That's okay. We're gonna take that one little thing and be like, "Oh, look what Sander said, you guys." Yeah.
If you need a mentor for your talk, ping me.
Yeah. I need all the mentors I can get. But thank you. That's so sweet.
We got you, Natty. It takes a village.
Yes.
Okay, also, so did you want to say something, Rob?
Here already, so.
What?
I mean, just pretend that you're just talking to friends. That should be easy.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't do the naked thing.
No, don't.
Sonder.
That's why I
You
don't
get
show my
really
picture,
strange
man.
talks if you imagine the people naked there. That doesn't work for me.
Too
Oh my
many
goodness,
people doing
Sonder's
it.
on a roll tonight. Okay, I don't know what Sonder's going to say next, so I think this is a good place to stop. Before we do, I just want to have a quick reminder. What do we got? Oh, you know what we're excited about. So first of all, just remember, you don't see all the events unless you join the channels. So we have a lot going on in Angular APAC, Angular Africa, Angular South Asia, Angular Americas, and of course, Storybook. We also have a Cyprus channel. So we have a lot of cool stuff going on. And I just really wanted to take one quick moment at the end of this to give a quick shout out to AG Grid and appreciate the sponsorship, because these, and I actually had a conversation with Kai about this, that we were going to monetize these so that we could bring in some money for Angular Nation to cover the bills. And AG Grid came in and covered it so that all of these events could be free for all of us. So thank you to AG Grid. Thank you to Storybook. Thank you to Kai and Mark and Sonder. We love you guys. We appreciate you. And that's it for tonight. So if you guys want to come off mute and just say thanks and say goodbye, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Don't get stressed.
Thank you.